So you go into prison and you're illiterate. You don't know how to read and write.
Now, I hit prison and I was illiterate, but I didn't believe that my literacy really mattered behind the walls. You know, it was my first time actually in prison. You know, I had been in juvenile hall and things like that. So the rules that govern prisons in the state of California, you know, was very different from anything that I had ever experienced. So by me being illiterate, right, I was a follower. And I fell into this whole idea of following behind those who I felt had my best interests at heart that was going to teach me something. And, you know, the biggest problem with me being illiterate was that I was prone to do whatever I was told, and I wasn't able to think for myself. And when I decided to think for myself, I basically was asking for permission to think. You know, I was asking for permission to move, you know, due to the level of violence and due to the level of gang concentration and just due to the level of this hypervigilance of the culture of prison, you know, which is kind of like being transported back to the 1950s. It's very racially segregated. They got a white area, they got a black area, they got a Hispanic area, they got white tables and Hispanic tables and drinking fountains, and it's all racially segregated, you know, and I had never experienced anything like that. And the rules were very, very stern. If you got out of line in regards to what the group of men that you hung with, me being black, so I was a part of the black population, and from my area, the consequences could cost you your life. So with me being illiterate also and not being able to think, I was kind of robotic in a way. I like to say that I was like the bubble boy. You know, I was in the bubble and I always looked up to see whatever you put in the bubble, and that's kind of like what I moved off of. That was kind of like my kicking. So getting in trouble in pen and breaking the laws and all the stuff that I was doing in prison was a product of my illiteracy.
Okay. And at one point, you actually learned how to read and write.
At one point I did, and I always tell the story, I stumbled across that really by accident. You know, I never really believed that reading was really going to change my situation, you know, because I never was able to read before, and so I didn't have any kind of understanding at the time of what education could really do as far as expanding your way of thinking about the world and the way you value your self-worth. So when I actually stumbled across learning how to read, basically was from a Star Wars book. You know, I was a huge fan of Star Wars, and I remember that you know, I was actually smoking weed one day. I was in the county jail, and I remember being high, man. You know, and I was sitting up on my bunk, and I grabbed this Star Wars book, and it had these hologram type of pictures on the cover of the book. And I was looking at the hologram pictures, and I remember when I opened the book, I saw it read, "In a galaxy far, far away." And I thought, like, first thing I was asking my bunkie, like, man, where the hell does weed come from? Like, that's some good shit. Like, I'm actually, for the first time in my life, I can actually I can read this. And what I didn't realize was that I had seen the Star Wars movies so many times, that I had memorized the dialogue in the movies, and the dialogue in the movies was the same that was in the books. And that's what sparked my interest to teach myself how to read.
Okay. So you go through the process of actually learning how to read and write, and that starts to change everything around you.
Yeah. I go through the process of learning how to read and write, and that's when my identity kind of started to change. My life, as far as the things that I did, I was still doing the same things, but I started to gain an identity. I started to read about people who was doing amazing things in the world that I had never knew people could do. And so that started to change my thought process and saying, wow, maybe I can do some other things. I didn't know what that looked, but it was along the lines of maybe something is possible. And so as my identity started to change, eventually my lifestyle started to change as I gained enough confidence and I gained enough courage in myself to become my own man. And ultimately reading kind of helped me come to that realization of that.